SpaceX is back on track. After scrubs on the 24th and 25th, the 10th flight of Starship took place on the 26th of August. The launch took place at exactly 6:30 in the evening Central Time, which meant 1:30 in the morning for us in Central Europe. The planned hold at T40 seconds was not used and the countdown continued. It was a breathtaking moment that kept us all in suspense. All 33 Raptor engines of the Super Heavy booster fired up and began to push the rocket skyward as planned. My name is Serwin and this is Mars Chronicles. Let's take off. Briefly after the 1-minute mark at max Q, a beautiful vapor cone formed around the vehicle. That was incredible to watch. John Krause took some fantastic photos of it, and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration spaceflight captured it on video. During ascent, one of the middle ring engines failed, which may have been intentionally simulated as SpaceX had announced. The stage separator. It went like clockwork at T+2 minutes and 40 seconds. The so-called deterministic flip of the booster was flawless. Here you can see the welded slots in the hot stage ring. These cause the exhaust gases from the upper stage to turn the booster in a specific direction to save fuel. The boost back burn took place without the failed engine. While we got breathtaking footage from SpaceX from the booster's perspective, National Aeronautics and Space Administration spaceflight provided incredible shots of the booster's re-entry and the landing burn. Before the landing burn, the space between the engines started to glow. At T+6 minutes and 20 seconds, the landing burn started with 12 instead of 13 engines to decelerate quickly. At 6 minutes and 23 seconds, the engines of the middle ring throttled down, and the simulated failed central engine was compensated by a Raptor from the middle ring. Then it switched to 2 central engines, performed a brief hover, shut down, and failed. At roughly 100 to 150 meters above the Gulf of Mexico, it exploded spectacularly on impact. Scott Manley suspects that they deliberately dropped the booster from a greater height so that it would sink and wouldn't have to be sunk afterwards. By the way, if you want to receive news from the space community directly in your inbox, register for the Mars Chronicles newsletter free of charge at Marstronic in Space. The link is below, but let's briefly go back to the ascent. At T+1 minute and 33 seconds, one engine failed. However, I am unsure whether this was simulated or unintentional, as SpaceX had announced that it would simulate an engine failure during this test. If the engine actually failed, it must be addressed. Otherwise, the simulation may have been unnecessary. These tests, often of nominal situations, led SpaceX to not catch the booster, but instead direct it into the Gulf of Mexico. They have already demonstrated catching the booster 3 times and reusing a booster once. This time, Super Heavy returned a bit less aggressively than on the last flight, where the angle of attack led to internal damage and an explosion. A new graphic animation showed the orientation of the vehicle in space. This will become important again later. Shortly before the 4-minute mark, the impressive shadow of the exhaust plume could be clearly seen on the right side of the image. The real focus was on the upper stage. This ship with the serial number 37 was the 5th overall of the Block 2 upper stages. The first 3 each failed for different reasons during flights 7, 8, and 9. And the ship actually designated for this test, with serial number 36, exploded on the test stand. So 4 major setbacks in a row. SpaceX was therefore in desperate need of celebrating another solid success and finally testing the new heat shield configuration. The heat shield tests, which had not been tested since Flight 7, could finally be carried out. But more on that later. At T+8 minutes and 49 seconds, a glowing spot can be seen on the exhaust belt of the Vacuum Raptor E6. That was also seen in previous flights and ended catastrophically. But according to Scott Manley, that could be normal. Maybe it's just a Raptor 2 problem that will be under control with Raptor 3. There were some cool shots between 9 and 10 minutes. After the ascent burn, the control surfaces tested their range of motion. A view of the lower right control flap showed that a bunch of tiles had fallen off. The reason for this is unknown at this time, but it can be assumed that SpaceX is continuing to test different adhesives and installation points. Many parts were deliberately removed to stress sensitive areas. Around the 12-minute mark, larger chunks broke off, partly ice, partly heat shield. According to Scott Mandy, this could be due to the ship being left outside for too long, causing rainwater and other particles to accumulate between the shield and the outer hull. And now in space, due to the temperature drop and evaporation, they act like wedges. In the payload bay, you can see here on the left side of the image 12 composite overwrapped pressure vessels, which were the cause of the S-36 explosion, and 2 fuel transfer pipes for the header tanks. For this, the ship positioned itself so that the door was turned in the direction of flight. So the dumplings flew in front of the ship for the rest of the mission, so to speak. The deployment of Starlink dummies was also a goal that SpaceX had been striving for since Flight 7. Because as cool and exciting as the development is, they're not doing it just for fun and games, but so that they can transport payloads at the end of the day. That's the only way the system can work. For partial operations and the transport of the first V3 satellites, the reuse and functionality of the heat shield is not absolutely necessary. Even though that is definitely the goal in the medium to long term, and it is desirable both economically and ecologically. Starship delivers 20 times more bandwidth to space than Falcon 9. Because it is capable of carrying 60 V3 satellites per flight, each of which has much greater capabilities. The current Starlinks deploying 60 satellites will take about an hour in the future. The deployment looked a bit shaky. One even bumped into the edge. That needs to go much more smoothly in the future. Not having a camera on the dumplings was a big disappointment. At the 26-minute mark, we got this shot. It shows the door closing and the light slowly fading. The door issue appears resolved. Just before the 38-minute mark, the in-space relight occurred, which is also essential for future missions. Shortly before that, the central 3 engines swung apart. One Raptor ignited briefly and accelerated. With that, SpaceX has all the components for Starlink transport. Reusability will then be developed during operation, exactly as they did with the Falcon 9. Then came what I consider to be the most spectacular and exciting part of the entire mission. As Reentry slowly began, plasma started to build up in front of the ship, and then suddenly, at T+47 minutes, this happened. This part of the outer hull in the engine area suddenly exploded into countless fragments. Here, the engine shields proved to be especially useful. You can see how this E3 engine would not have been able to perform another ignition safely without the shield. The whole thing happened at an altitude of 90 kilometers. So it couldn't really have been aerodynamic forces, maybe debris, pressure buildup, or ice in a valve. But it looked like an impact. There are rumors on X that the dumplings, which were still flying in front of the ship, could have caused a collision. What do you think happened here? Write your thoughts in the comments. The spot was at the lower left control surface. You can see that clearly later. At T+51 minutes, we saw the affected area from the outside, and you could see how the metal was fluttering, melting and flying off. The other side was also damaged, but we didn't see an explosion here. So that must have happened during re-entry. This time the entry angle was chosen so that the lower control surfaces were especially stressed. This damage could therefore be related to that. Despite everything, the flaps remained in control and steered the aircraft to its designated landing zone in the Indian Ocean, northwest of Australia. We will soon see how precisely this was achieved. At T+52 minutes, hot gases escaped through joints. That's already much better than before, but still not perfect. For this to work sustainably, it needs to be much tighter. Many parts had been deliberately left out. That was probably one of the reasons for the sparks. This perspective in the engine room makes it very clear. Those were breathtaking shots again, which we were able to enjoy live and in high definition. At this point, we were very curious in the live stream to see what would happen. Because after the energetic event in the engine compartment, it was unclear whether the engines were still working and whether the landing would be successful. A new graphic showed the resulting G-forces. These reached a maximum value of 2.3 G at an altitude of 47 kilometers. Comfortable. At T plus 53 minutes, the horizon and sunrise appeared. Then the front 9 control flaps came into view, which were in surprisingly good condition. During previous re-entries, they actually burned through, so this is another big improvement. SpaceX appears to have performed many experiments with the control surfaces. You can see here, for example, how actively this control surface wiggles, as if it's calibrating itself. That's valuable data for the future. At T plus 58 minutes, you can see that the ship starts steering north toward the area with the buoys. As the atmosphere started to get denser at around 50 kilometers, the braking effect increased. The plasma disappeared, but the heat shield tiles started to glow instead. Pay attention to the edges of the heat shield here, where you can already see this reddish-orange glow. Even after the glowing stopped, the red color remained here on the control surface. Then it fell through a cloud and initiated the belly flop and the landing burn. Finally, after a little more than an hour, it touched down gently in the waters of the Indian Ocean. During the splashdown, the buoy's perspective reveals how strange the heat shield now looks. The lower two-thirds are covered with the rust-like red color that we also saw in the last kilometers of the descent. Then there's an area that's completely normal black from the tiles, and at the very front, the ship is white. Some people believe that the ship has lost all or most of its tiles. Many tiles definitely fell off or were torn off during re-entry, but most of the tiles stayed on. Only up here at the front can I imagine that the entry angle really stripped away the entire ablative layer. The question remains, where does this color come from? Scott Manley has no idea what this is either, but he makes some guesses that actually make sense. It could be glue that chemically reacted during re-entry and leaked out. Or it could be the new tiles themselves, or rather, some of the experimental tiles are responsible. What do you think it is? Now there is one Block 2 ship and one booster. SpaceX will probably want to verify the results of this test flight and launch this stack as well. Since everything went according to plan on Flight 10, Flight 11 could already take place in a month. We'll have to wait a little longer for Flight 12, since this mission will already take place with the Block 3 vehicles, and they need the new launch facility at Pad 2, which won't be ready for use until Q1 2026 at the earliest. However, before they catch a ship, they'll also carry out 1 or 2 successful missions with Block 3 with similar profiles to Flight 10. Or rather, Elon wrote on X during the night of August 28 that the first catch attempt with Starship will be made sometime between Flight 13 and 15, depending on the performance of the Block 3 vehicles. In the run-up to the mission, we received some highly interesting information about Mars ambitions in the SpaceX stream. The stated goal is to send an unspecified number of ships to Mars as early as 2026 with overwhelming force. Regardless of the chances of success, just fly there and see what challenges arise. The ships will also be so rudimentary and experimental that they will land without legs. I didn't make that up, they said it in the stream, and these illustrations show it that way too. To me, this fact points to 2 things. Firstly, they don't see much chance of success for the landing. Secondly, they don't want to bring these ships back. In the following Mars transfer window in the years 2028 and 2029. The chances of success are followed by starships with basic infrastructure and a whole bunch of Optimus robots. These ships already have legs by then and will be more advanced. If successful, the first humans will follow in 2031 or 2032. That's the plan. Until then, obstacles will arise along the way and delay everything. But without bold ambitions, none of us would be here today. All in all, Flight 10 was the huge success that SpaceX and we absolutely needed. Congratulations to SpaceX, to you, and to all of us as humanity for this success. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to Mars Chronicles and leave a thumbs up. Thank you to all our loyal members and patrons. If you would like to become part of the community, you can find all the information you need in the description below. I'm Serwin and this was Mars Chronicles. Thanks for tuning in. Per aspera ad astra.